Project number 4 by Ederson Silva. In this video, I will explain 25 differences between English and Spanish. The first, verb conjugation. In English, verb conjugation depends on the subject. For example, in one sentence as in present, the end of the verb only changes in the third person. In English, we have to change the end of verbs in each subject. For example, I eat chocolate. He eats chocolate. They eat chocolate. Yo como chocolate. Él come chocolate. Ellos comen chocolate. Subject. In English, you have to include the subject in almost all sentences, but in Spanish, you can eliminate it if you want. For example, I am Ederson. Soy Ederson. Or I study English. Estudio inglés. Auxiliaries. In English, it's necessary to use an auxiliary to express questions. In Spanish, we put an interrogative pronoun or we change the intonation of the structure to make a question. For example, do you study English? ¿Estudias inglés? Do you like grammar class? ¿Te gusta la clase de gramática? Grammar order. Adjectives in English are placed before nouns, contrary to Spanish, where adjectives are placed after nouns. For example, a beautiful house, una casa bonita, or red car, el carro rojo. Gender. In English, adjectives don't have gender and number. In Spanish, they have it. For example, beautiful ladies, a beautiful lady. Las chicas bonitas, la chica bonita. Possessive case. In English, they have something called the possessive case, while in Spanish this doesn't exist. Example, Ederson's birthday, el cumpleaños de Ederson. Carlos' house, la casa de Carlos. Articles. In Spanish, indefinite articles are una, un, unas, and unos. In English, they have a, and some. For example, un perro negro, a black dog. Unos perros negros, black dogs. Articles. The definite article in English is always dead, but in Spanish we have el, la, los, and las. For example, el niño gordo, the fat boy, la niña gorda, the fat girl, and las niñas gordas, the fat girls. Pronouns. In English, the pronoun you is used in singular and plural, but in Spanish we have different forms. You are tall can traduce tú eres alto, usted es alto, ustedes son altos. Capital letters. Both English and Spanish use capital letters to names after quotation marks, etc. But there are some differences in some words. For example, English and Spanish, inglés y español requires capital letters in English, but not in Spanish. Capital letters. The pronoun I in English we always use with capital letters the pronoun I, but in Spanish it is used in small letters. Example, I want to see you. Yo quiero verte. I tell him. Yo te lo dije. Gender. In general, adjectives in English don't have gender, but in Spanish adjectives always have it. For example, a nice girl, una chica bonita. Nice girls, chicas bonitas. Subjunctive usage. In English, in Spanish, we use the subjunctive usually different to English, which we use rarely. Negation. To make a negation in Spanish, you only have to add not, while in English you have to use the auxiliary do and add the negation not. For example, no quiero estudiar, I don't want to study. No quiero jugar, I don't want to play. Idioms. Translation of the most part of idioms is different. For example, in Spanish, contame una de vaqueros is traduced like tell it to the Marines. Las cosas pasan por algo, that's the way the ball bounces. Punctuation. The decimal point is totally different in English and Spanish. Example, 3,4 in Spanish is 3.4 in English. 2,835, 345 in Spanish is 2,845,345 in English. Similar words. English and Spanish are languages derived from Latin. For this reason, there are some words that are written equal to others, but the meaning could be totally different. Example, In English, actual is real, and real in Spanish is real. To quit is abandonar. Quitar is to remove. Words ending. In Spanish, we have something called diminutivos. This doesn't exist in English, at least not in one word like in Spanish. For example, niñita, a little girl. Amorcito, it doesn't have translation. Verb, there is and there are. In English, this verb has two forms and two words, but in Spanish, it has one word and one form. Hay, for example, hay dos casas, there are two houses. Or hay alguien allá, there is someone there. Pronunciation. In Spanish, each word is pronounced. Each word represents a sound. In English, the pronunciation is totally different, and words could or couldn't be pronounced. ing usage. In English, ing at the end of one verb can express present continuous, infinitive, adjective, noun, and it has to be used after preposition. In English, we don't have this form. In Spanish, it is translated like ando, endo. The verb to be. In Spanish, to be can be translated as ser or estar, but estar doesn't exist in English. For them, ser or estar is the same. Moreover, they use to be to say the age. Example, tengo 20 años, I am 20 years old. Phrasal verbs. The use of phrasal verbs is another difference with Spanish languages, because in Spanish this phenomenon doesn't exist. In Spanish, the most part of verbs have one word. For example, get up, levantarse, come on, vamos. Finally, prenominal verbs. In English, prenominal pronouns that not exist. Phrases like se murió, nos queremos, se aman, don't have a exact translation. For example, se murió, he died. And finally, the end. Thank you.